Okay, let's have a quick overview of the human resources tools and payroll in the Orax SDI system. The entire human resources module is accessed from the menu under human resources. In the module you can manage employed people, employees, contractors. You can capture and manage recruitment records, build rosters, view timesheets, view sales commissions for sales staff, manage leave and claims, manage payroll batches, view tax reports, and do the setup of certain human resource wide parameters. Under your leave and claims, you can manage leave. So each user of the system, whether it's an HR user, which is the basic employee self-help license, or a CRM license, can do leave applications, and they can be approved by managers and HR managers. All the detail is here. You can configure it. Then you can also manage expense claims and reimburse those claims on the system. You can manage credit card expenses, where statements are loaded with credit card expenses and then processed by the users and accounting. You can manage travel claims, overtime claims, standby claims, and call out claims. On the payroll tab, this is where you create a monthly or a weekly batch, and you pay a lot of employees in one go. The reports are basic tax reports, like your pay-as-you-earn report and reconciliation reports, with some links to the South African Revenue Service. Let's quickly have a look at the employee. So the basis is your employee record. You can set up and do everything on the employee record, but these tabs up here are basically batch tabs. So you can do a pay slip on the employee record, but you can also do a pay batch, which basically would do a lot of pay slips in one go, and is much more efficient than doing one pay slip at a time per employee. So if you go into a specific employee's account, the basic setup and all the records that are required by the legislation and your company is on the first tab. Then there's a billing tab. Whenever this person does work in a consulting or a way where hours are billed or commission is earned for sales, those kind of things, you can manage it there. There's an HR notes tab where you do all kinds of HR documents, like consultations and warnings and written warnings, dismissals. Those kind of documents can be managed on the HR notes tab. Then you can, if you do have a large company and you want to manage skills for projects in the system, you can basically assign skills to specific employees that other project managers can use. They can query skills and then find matches in the system. You can set up an individual roster for this person, and of course on the HR, which if you go back to this tab, the rosters tab here allows you to manage rosters for everybody, whereas on the specific record it's just for that person. Then the time tab is basically related to timesheets and also a clocking system. So first of all, this system does have automatic clocking based on your office location, your IP address. It can tell you how many hours per day a person is spending on the system if they are IT based, and also you are able to add access control devices to the system where effective clocking in and out is managed. So all those, including timesheets, are available on this tab. And then your payroll tab is the most important. This is where you manage pay slips and the salary or wage for this person. We'll look at that just now. The leave tab is also very important. You set up your leave on top, how many days per year, any leave opening balances, whether the leave is prorated during the year, you know, who approves it, that kind of stuff you set up in leave. And this is also where you manage it. It will show you exactly, you know, where all the different kind of types of leave somebody can take and where they are in terms of their balances. The access tab is just for access control, and this is where you can add notes and internal notes basically around somebody. It's not related to the HR notes, which are basically a notification going to the employee. This is a discussion, management discussion or notes internally about this person, or maybe administrative notes around them, uploading of past reports and stuff like that. Okay, let's look at the payroll tab. This is the most important one. The sections are very logical. In the top section you can add any detail around tax and bank account. The second one is just the addresses and dates. Technically these two are very close to some of the fields on this first tab will also be in these two sections. And then this is where we set up the actual salary for this person. So first of all, we can there's a center. If you do have different departments and a region, you can manage those, but basically we want to just record how will we be paying this salary, whether it's a transfer, an electronic transfer. Also the interval, that's very important, because when you create a payroll batch you have to select which type of batch it is. If it's a monthly batch that you create, it will only add people who have a pay interval of monthly to that batch. If it's a weekly batch, you need to set that up. So you set up your employee with the interval, and then you create a batch with that same interval, and those employees will be matched. Okay, then the pay type is important. It's either fixed, shifts, or hours. So fixed means we pay a fixed basic salary. Shifts means that based on the roster and most probably a clocking system, we will be paying per shift. Hours means it's a consultant or a contractor that pays per hour, earns per hour, and it's usually based on timesheets. And then a pay rate can be set up. You can set up pay rates in the payroll tab, and this is used only if you do have a large group of employees receiving the same type of rate, and instead of managing those rates on an employee level, you would just be adjusting the pay rate, and that would affect all those employees. So a pay rate effectively means it's mostly based on shifts, but it can be anything that that this person now is part of a bigger setup, and the increases and the actual values are managed on the pay rate rather than on the individual records. The basic salary. So if we look at the actual payment amounts, there are three that correspond to these pay types. First of all, a basic salary corresponds to fixed, and then we have an hourly rate and a shift rate, so they would correspond to these two. If you pay per shift, you need to add a shift rate in there. And so the income, the monthly or weekly income for that person would be based on the amount of shifts times this rate. So when you do a basic salary, you just add the amount here, and the system will give you a quick breakdown. It will says that based on what you entered here, this is what the person earns per day, if it's a 5-week day, and this is what they'll be earning for the entire year. And then if you want to do adjustments, you can actually do it up here. show the adjustment. It'll show you how much it's adjusted. If you want to add a 3% increase, it'll show you the amount. You can apply it or reset it, and then you can show the increase history. So let's assume that you've employed this person for a long time. You can see the increases over the past many years, and then you can finally also preview the payslip. So this is going to open in a new tab, a draft payslip for this person. It'll say that it's only a preview, and it only relates to basic pay. So the preview would not include any additional earnings or deductions. Okay, you can also adjust the leave on this tab and add any notes to the bottom of the payslip, which will be down here at the bottom. So once we've done the basic payroll setup, we can also add additional earnings and deductions. So earnings and deductions are mostly related to things like allowances, which are limited, but let's assume that the person does have some form of a provident fund or a retirement savings or any structured pay that requires an adjustment to the tax and individual items on the payslip. You can add them here. It's just a simple form where you start off and by saying this is an earning or a deduction. You give it a description. You add the amount on the payslip or the percentage of this person's salary. So it's either or. You can also add company contributions in the same way, either amount or percentage for the specific earning or deduction. The tax would be whether this is 100% taxable or 0% taxable. So whenever you add an earning or a deduction, they could be taxable or not, and that's often the reason you structure a payslip, is to adjust the amount of tax payable. You can check the VAT column, because in some cases, if it relates to some assets that the employee is involved in, there may be a VAT charge against selling, or whatever cases. There are cases where VAT is applicable to the specific deduction or earning. And then you need to add the SARS or the tax code. This is important because this filters through to your reconciliation reports to ensure that the person at the end of the year has a proper and accurate tax record that relates to the government authority, to SARS's tax records. You can also put a company tax code in there if needed. Then you can basically say that this specific earning or deduction will be running from a specific date to a specific date. So let's assume it's only applicable for 6 months. You pre-configure it here, and the system will just add this item to the payslip for that period. If you leave them blank, it'll just be on there indefinitely. You can also add extra information like an external reference and a reference, and then also a GL account. So a GL account in most cases are very important. Well, in fact, in all cases are very important, because this earning or deduction will end up in the company financials. So that means the employee earns money, and on the other end the company pays that money, and the tax is allocated. So there's a big structure of postings that happens for every single payslip, and so you need to add a GL account. So in this case it states that an earning should be an expense account. So you could say this is this person is earning a specific allowance, and I'm going to put it against the expense account for salaries and wages, or another type of account. It depends on how you want to record these transactions. And it says if it's a deduction, you can either leave it blank, which means the system will automatically assign it, or you can add a control account, which in most cases would mean we want to manage this separately so for instance, if it's a employee loan or something like that, you would want to post it to a specific control account to know when that employee has paid off their loan. So these these additional earnings and deductions can be set up, and then when the pay slip is generated, you can review it and make any adjustments. You can also make adjustments on a specific pay slip for that pay slip only. You can also manage cash advances, expenses, and employee repayments. So in most cases, whenever employees loan money, save money, or do cash related adjustments to their wage or salary, you won't be recording it in this section. This is to structure the basic pay for tax purposes, and this is to manage cash for a specific employee. So that means somebody asks you to save them some money. They want to buy something and they want to save a certain amount per month. You would be managing these in here. Or somebody buys something from the system and from the company and needs to pay it off, pay it back over a time period, or takes out a loan from the company. Those transactions will all be managed in this section. Okay, and then finally you can generate a payslip and view the payslip history. What's important, generate payslip, is basically what you do on a per employee record. So I suggest you don't do it here, but you instead use the HR payroll tab to do a payroll batch, which is here, and that will allow you to generate payslips for several or all employees with the same effort just once off. So it's much more effort to jump through each of these employees. So you can basically go to an employee's payroll tab, generate a payslip, then skip to the next employee, do the same one by one, but you would end up with individual payslips that you have to then individually go pay, whereas when you do it in a batch, they'll all be grouped into that batch and show you a nice overview of how to pay them. So you can go onto your bank once and pay the entire batch and know that everything is good, and the payslips will be emailed as one specific set. So it's definitely the better admin option. Okay, so you can generate it here, and this is where you can view it. What's important to understand is that every single payslip will eventually be able to show you the general ledger transactions for that payslip, which is handy if you look at this from an accounting view. So this person earned a specific salary for the month, and this is how it will end up in the general ledgers. In the general ledger, it'll pay a salary, or it'll post to the salary and wages expense account. It'll post to the employees account and to pay as you earn account, and several of those records. And this is kind of your check and balance to ensure that it does balance for this specific payslip. And you may need to just refer to this for debugging purposes. Once your payroll is set up, you won't have any of those issues. And that's it. Let's just have a quick look at the payroll account. So when the payroll batch tab, so when you do a new batch, just want to say that over here you can set up pay periods, pay rates, and pay items. So pay periods are basically just telling the system I want to pay per month, and it's just basically a guide. A pay rate is to say I will be paying certain employees the same rates, and I configure it here and then just select those pay rates on the employee records. And these pay items are basically used for in the pay rates as well. They are technically, these items are like group deductions or expenses. So you can technically say that I'm going to create a specific deduction which will be available to a group of employees. And once you're ready, you create your new batch. We'll select a fixed batch, so it'll only select employees who's got a fixed pay type select on their account, and we'll also say this is monthly. So this is basically a filter from all your employees. It'll only select the active employed ones that's got a pay type of fixed and an interval of monthly. You can set up the pay date, so this will probably be towards the end of the month. I'll do it the 25th, and then I will say that this specific pay batch covers a period of from the first of the month to the end of the month. What is important to note here is that when you do pay per shift or per month, this period per shift or per hour, this period will be used to harvest those hours off the system if possible, but in many cases you need to manually link those, especially if of course those records aren't in the system. I'll also select a bank account from which I will be paying this batch. Once I'm ready, I can create it. I just want to say one thing. Tax in the payroll module is managed on an annual basis. That means the system, technically, if you are on month 6 of your annual year, it will go through all the payroll records for those first 6 months and then calculate the tax payable by this employee at that specific time. So you cannot go and create several pay slips per month for somebody which isn't active and then assume that tax calculations will be correct. You have to ensure that every single month your pay slips are in fact accurate. This is not metadata. This actually ends up in your financials. So pay slips have to be handled with extra care, and you have to be prudent when you do create these pay slips and manage them to ensure that none of those pay slips are invalid because they will affect both tax and your company's financials. So I've created the batch and it shows me here, this is the batch for May 2020, this is the batch ID, and this is the range, and its status is still open. So if I click on the batch, I can either click here or on the ID, it'll open that batch and now allow me to process it. On top it gives an overview. There are some parameters I can change. I have to confirm that this is what I want and that it has to generate the payslip. So at this stage with the open status, there aren't any payslips. It just says I will be generating payslips for these employees. And also there may be approval set up, so you may need to your manager or somebody, the company owner, may need to approve this batch. So keep in mind that is possible. So if I'm happy with this selection of employees, I'll go ahead and generate the pay slips, and that now the pay slips are generated. You'll see I have some extra options. I can, for instance, re-import rosters and timesheets. So let's assume some of these guys were paid per shift or per hour. It'll be recorded here based on the system totals, which I incidentally can change. I can click on it and change those hours if it was from an external system. So you can do this on your batch. Simply update all those hours and then click update remuneration and taxes, and it'll adjust any of the amounts. Or I can automatically just tell the system I've made changes to the timesheets, now re-import them, and these hours will be automatically updated. So for each employee I now have a payslip number. If I click it, it'll open in a new tab, and I can make adjustments or view the detail of this payslip. I can, for instance, add notes at the bottom of this payslip. Okay. I can click on the basic pay and adjust it manually for this month. I can add an overtime amount for this month only manually by clicking it. This is your earnings and deductions, which will be the total here between the earnings and deductions. This will be the total amount of pay as you earn that is payable at this month for this pay slip. And keep in mind, this is an annual, it's calculated for the entire year. So if somebody earns more during a specific month, it does not look at that month in isolation, but it looks at every month up to this specific month, and then does an adjustment based on the annual pay as you earn that will be paid, should be paid for this employee. This is the UIF and the SDL that's payable. This is the net amount that will go to the employee. If this looks fine, so I've got totals at the bottom, I will continue to authorize and then pay this batch. Now this is where, if you set it up, you may need a manager or somebody else to authorize this batch. If I've confirmed it, it's now basically generated the batch, and it's given me some totals that has to be paid at the bottom. Now it's important to note that it says click here to post to GL and refresh the pay list. So before you can actually pay these amounts, you have to post to the GL, because what is important to understand is that every employee has a pay record and a cash record, and those need to match up. For instance, you will see that the variance after I've posted to the GL is 0. So the system posts these pay slips to the general ledger and then says, does this employee owe us any money, or do we owe this employee any money? Because those variances it may be important that if there were any cash movements or loans or claims during the month by a specific employee, that the system knows about it, because it has to adjust the amount paid. That means the amount paid to an employee may not always be the same as it is on the payslip, because you may have earned 20 grand, or that's your net earning, but you may have loaned 5,000 Rand during the month, or you may have claimed expenses, travel expenses, and so the company now owes you 5,000 Rand more. And since we've posted to the GL, the system now knows exactly what the cash account for this employee looks like, so that we ensure we pay the correct amount. So at this stage, we can now either export this and load it to an ACB list if we have many employees, or we can simply log on to the bank and pay these amounts. And once we are happy, we can say confirm, I have paid, print the pay slips, or email the pay slips. So when you email, they are simply sent per email. When you print, you need pre-printed salary slips that you can probably load into an inkjet or laser printer, and it'll simply generate the batch and then allow you to print all those pay slips in one go. So that depends on which route is easier for you. Of course, emails are very simple if all your employees do have emails. What you can do is you can email it in any case, and then let's assume a few of those don't have, then you just go print theirs manually. And this is your pay batch. If we click on the payroll tab again, we'll see this pay batch is now generated. It's not completed yet because we haven't printed or emailed it. We basically need to say we have confirmed, so technically I need to go through that step again, confirm that it is paid, and I want to print those pay slips. So once this is done, the batch is now complete, and I can actually go and print the pay slips. I can re-email or print those pay slips. Okay, so if we look at one of these pay slips now, they will look, this is what they look like in the system, but this is what they look like to an employee, and they will print correctly on a pre-printed salary slip or pay slip. And this is basically the overview. Leave and claims is a case of doing leave approvals on a monthly basis if people claim leave.